Wow, you have your whole cheering crowd back.
I sure do.
And up here front as well. Good. So our next speaker is going to be Elizabeth Glau. Elizabeth Glau is a designer of experiences with a passion for corporate culture. And I would say she's also someone to just jump at it, because one of our speakers had to take care of a grandfather in Washington State and had to cancel this morning. And Elizabeth jumped in. And she's like, oh, I don't need any slides, I'm ready. So she's going to talk about aligning attendee experience with employee experience. So welcome to you.
Thank you. So this is my ampersand, what I'm going to talk to you about today. I've kind of combined the work that I've done in the past to a new field, and what I want to talk to you about today is those connections that I've made between the two. So many of the current best practices when we think of attendee experience, designing an experience for people attending an event, and the best practices we think of when we're designing our employee experience are actually very similar. So that's the bridge that I'm going to talk about today. So let's begin with the physical space. When we're designing an event, and this is like a great example because here we are at an event, you think of drawing the little map on a piece of paper, you put as many chairs on there as you can, right? You keep tables that allow the room for this, right? So it's very just 2D, right? But a lot of times we're planning events. And I think the same goes when we're planning an office kind of environment. It's like, let's just draw in the desks and, you know, whatever, maybe some meeting rooms that we need to draw in there for people to get work done. So we're not really thinking about the human needs of either of these interactions, right? These are just physical objects that we're plotting down on a piece of paper, but we're not truly thinking about how the humans will interact with those objects and what they really need. So what if we were to create more space for collaboration, both formal and informal? And what if we were to create spaces that support people's different working styles? And that applies to both environments. If you're planning an event like a conference, you want to incorporate those items, as well as when you're planning an office space or a place for people to do their work. So speaking of collaboration, as we all know, I'm sure all of you have attended many conferences, and I love the theme of this particular event, right? Because this is getting to the core of what we like to call the sage on the stage, which is me right now. So the typical design of a conference is to have the expert up on the stage and everyone else, just like you're doing here, you know, sits and listens very attentively. Hopefully, you know, they learn something. And I correlate that to our work environments these days with, you know, typically there are experts in the company, and it's kind of that top-down approach, right? Like they're telling everybody else what to do, and all the employees are just meant to do it, right? Just listen to them because they're the experts. So what's maybe better, a different way to think about both of these environments? So in conferences, there's a very old concept that's, you know, just getting more traction, I know Lena's familiar with, which are unconferences or open space. There's a lot of different, you know, names and different ways to do them, but really it boils down to peer-to-peer learning. Right? How do you get the folks to learn from each other? And I think this is a little bit what we're doing here. It's just, you know, having random people from the audience share, but sharing in different ways. And so think about your work environment and your employees. How can you incorporate more of them, you know, collaborating with each other and sharing with each other, coming up with the solutions, as opposed to just being, you know, that top-down approach. But we want our employees to be happy, right? So that's why we you know, give them games, we give them ping pong tables, right? Really, I think a lot of employees probably see through that a little bit. If the office is so comfortable, then I won't mind being here 80 hours a week, right? We get the message, right, loud and clear. Like, I see what's going on here, you know, but we talk about it like it's happiness. And, you know, in some conferences and events, there's certainly ways to incorporate games, you know, whether they're digital or physical. But well, the question I would ask is, certainly this applies to a segment of your attendees/employees, right? If you've got, you know, salespeople, if you're doing a sales conference, by all means, right? Like they need a competition, right? They're very competitive. It's a great idea to work that in, and the same thing, you know, with your sales employees. You want to promote that competition potentially. But that's not going to be all of your attendees or all of your employees either, right? Like they're not all going to want to play ping pong or play games and have, that kind of thing. So just do it, but acknowledge the fact that it's not a perk that like necessarily everybody is going to be into. It doesn't apply to everyone. And calling that your corporate culture is, inappropriate, right? Because again, it only applies to a few people, and if that's what culture means to you, is having a ping pong table in your office, then probably you need to reevaluate what your values are. I think that engagement is more important than quote-unquote happiness. When you look at the conference environment, you have attendees who become advocates for the conference, for whoever the host organization is, and they cannot wait to tell other people about it. And ideally, you want the same thing for your company, right? You want employees that are so fired up and so excited about your company that they can't wait to tell all their friends about it and share in that way. Because they truly care about the organization and its goals, and their success is your success. I mean, the same thing applies to both areas. You also want, as you guys all know, diverse voices from people who are brave enough to actually use those voices in an environment where they're supported, to give that constructive feedback and facilitate those kinds of conversations, because that creates the most successful organizations. So give them the tools to share that message. If they are actually excited and happy about where they are, the conference they're attending or the work that they're doing, make it easy for them to share that and support them in doing that. And if you want to hire me as your Chief Culture Officer, I'm available to do more of this work. So thank you so much for listening.
Thanks for jumping in and for sharing some insights with us this evening. Next up is Karthy. Karthy is the founder and CEO of Golden Hour, a tech startup that helps people make more time and space for their goals and good habits. Welcome up to the stage.
Hello, thank you all for coming out. Agile self-development is a topic that is very near and dear to my heart, so I'm excited to share it with you all today. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the Agile methodology, it's basically a very particular approach to project management that has taken the tech world by storm. And the whole premise of it is using iterative, incremental work sequences to deal with the unpredictable nature of building software. And Scrum is basically an implementation of the Agile methodology, and quite simply a framework for effective team collaboration. And there are a lot of ceremonies used in Agile and Scrum that can be very easily adapted into daily and weekly rituals for your personal life. So here's a little crash course. We'll start with the basics. The sprint is a time box of usually a month or less, in which a done, usable, and potentially releasable product increment is created. And so in our unique self-improvement twist to the sprint, we're also going to operate in a time frame. I prefer a week since that's the societal construct that we already follow, but you can choose any chunk of time that floats your boat. Every sprint starts with a planning session. So the team usually comes together, they review their backlog, and they choose what work they're going to focus on for that sprint. It's important to note that the planned work is not necessarily a commitment, it's simply a forecast. Sometimes work is more complicated than expected, or unplanned surprises pop up, and the team is just adaptive or agile with it. And the parallel to that is some weekly planning. You might sit down on Sunday night and assess what needs to get done based on urgency and importance, and choose how you want to break down some of your larger goals into more bite-sized tasks and routines. This is also a really great ritual to involve your spouse or children in, as very often the plan for the week revolves around family activities and responsibilities. So however you want to do it, having a plan of attack for the week could prevent you from aimlessly spiraling and hyperventilating on Monday morning. Next, we have the daily stand-up, which is usually a quick meeting around the same time every day where the team comes together to synchronize on activities and create a plan for the next 24 hours. It's usually oriented around 3 questions. What have you done since the last meeting? What do you plan to get done before the next meeting? And what's getting in your way? And so our analog to that is just some daily planning. You want to review what your schedule has on it and identify where you have time to work on your tasks and make progress on your goals. You might even consider actually blocking off time in your calendar for these activities to hold yourself accountable to them. And be flexible when things take longer than expected, and don't forget to make time for breaks. So at the end of the sprint, it's very common to do a sprint review where the whole team comes together with other stakeholders and sometimes even the customer to review the work that's been done and also hear feedback that may influence the next cycle of iteration. And so you could do something very similar for your life. You could do a weekly review where you look at what you set out to accomplish and see how you stacked up. Be proud of what you did achieve, but also take note of what you might be neglecting or where you might be oversubscribed. And that might be a good indication that you maybe need to take things down a notch or nix a few things altogether, and that's okay. And lastly, we have the retrospective, which is an improvement meeting. The team comes together to discuss any potential pitfalls and brainstorm some solutions to avoid making those mistakes the next time around. Again, generally oriented around 3 questions: what went well, what should we continue doing, and how can we improve for the next sprint? And those are some pretty great questions to ask yourself too. It's a great idea to take some time at the end of the week to reflect, contemplate on what you learned, what you enjoyed most, and how you want to improve the next time around. And over time, you might actually start to see some patterns emerge that would have otherwise gone unnoticed. And so this introspection really has the power to clarify your thinking and drive better decision making. And that's kind of the life cycle of using Agile in your personal life. The really important part of this is to be consistent. Very often when we try to make changes in our life, we declare that we're going to turn over a new leaf, and we're intensely motivated and excited to get started, and that's followed by a period of intense activity,